Hello fellow 3D enthusiast, my name is Ian, and I'm in the middle of a bit of a series here, talking about some motion tracking things that I did not know for the longest time, and I feel embarrassed to admit that, but I figure if I show you, then that'll be less ignorant people in the world. So yeah, might as well go ahead and share these things. Today we're going to be talking about keyframes, or match type of trackers. And you can see that up here, this is the setting. You got two things, keyframe or previous frame. And let's break this down in an example. So we could go over here to this thingy here and maybe scale this up a little bit. We've got location and rotation enabled. And if you don't know what that means for the motion model, check out the last video. But once we do that, let's just go ahead and track it forwards with E. Track it forwards. Yeah, there we go. Nice. And it lost the track here. So what we have to do is add in a new keyframe. And that's super easy to do. We just hit G to grab it and replace it where it was. And you can see there's a lighter yellow down here on the timeline. And then everywhere where it's auto tracked, you can see it's a bit yellow. And then at the start, we can see it's yellow again. Now these brighter yellow points are keyframes. And if we take a look at the pattern here, this is what Blender is looking for. It wants to figure out where that is at all times. And if we're in the middle here, say, it is still trying to look for this keyframe. And if we're over here, it is still trying to look for this keyframe. And I believe if we're trying to track it backwards, it's going to be looking for this keyframe that's behind it. So now that we've set in a new keyframe here, we can hit E and track it forwards again, and it finishes the track all nice and dandy. Cool. So in most cases, the keyframe setting is pretty good, and that's what I use most of the time. But the case may arise when we want to switch that to previous frame. And remember, if we want to change the settings for this particular track, we have to change it in this panel. So let's go to our first keyframe. There's some more footage at the start that we didn't track. So let's see what happens if we switch the match type to be from keyframe to previous frame and track it backwards. Hey, not bad. It tracked it all right. So the idea with previous frame, let's start a new marker. Maybe I can show you how this has strengths and how it has weaknesses. So let's switch our default tracker settings to be previous frame, and let's try dropping one right here. Okay, so the idea is instead of having keyframes, Blender will see this for one frame, and then the next frame, it'll try to look for that. And then the next frame, it'll try to look for what it saw before in the previous frame. So if we track this forward, hey, that works out pretty well for us. So the advantage to this method is that it loses its track a lot less because it's always trying to track the pattern to the last frame. And the disadvantage is if it slips off the mark a little bit, then it'll compare it to the last frame and then be tracking off the mark. And we might be able to see that a bit better than something that's a bit more difficult to track, like this one down here. So if I drop in a tracker using the previous frame match method and just track it forwards, holy crap, it's doing well. You can see it does work pretty nicely, but it is slipping around on the tracker. You can see over here it's on the corner of it, and as we go through, it's in the center, and then closer to the end, it's just sliding all around. So the disadvantage here is that it's a little bit less accurate. Okay, I picked a really difficult tracker to kind of show you what happens when it goes wrong. So it thought this area of the hand was this tracker, and then it was like, okay, so since this is the previous frame, the next time it's looking for that same area of my arm. And so it's like, okay, we got this. Let's bump over. Yep, still looking for that. Still looking for that. And it's completely off the mark, and it thinks it's correct. And that does happen sometimes with keyframe, but I found with previous frame, it happens a lot more often. So yeah, that's the deal with previous frame and keyframe match methods. If you found this useful and you're interested in learning more about visual effects in Blender, I've created a completely free video for you, and in this video I share 5 tips for integrating your CG creations into real-life footage. And if that sounds interesting to you, there's a link in the description, so give that a click. But hey, I'd say we're done here. I hope you have an excellent day, and cheers!